The silence of the early morning weighed heavily over Lieutenant Eleanor Ellie Stone's small suburban home. After a grueling 12-hour shift, she had finally surrendered to the comfort of her worn leather armchair, her service weapon set aside on the coffee table, her mind drifting toward the fragile luxury of sleep. But at exactly 1 a.m., a frantic pounding rattled her front door. She jolted upright, instincts sharp as ever, hand reaching for her gun before she even registered the sound. When she pulled open the door, her heart clenched. There stood Amelia, her only daughter, her pride and joy, barely able to remain upright. One eye swollen shut, lips split and bloodied, her entire frame trembling. A bruise deep and ugly spread across her abdomen where she clutched herself protectively. "Mom," Amelia's voice cracked, hoarse and broken. "It's Marcus. He hit me again." Because of Veronica? Eleanor caught her before she collapsed completely, lowering her gently onto the couch. Rage burned hot in Eleanor's chest, mingling with an all-too-familiar dread. She had seen women like this countless times in her career, broken, bruised, carrying the invisible scars of betrayal. But this time it was her daughter. Her child, as Amelia sobbed into her mother's shoulder. Eleanor's mind flashed through images of Marcus, his smug grin, the false charm he displayed at family gatherings, and now his violence revealed in the cruelest way possible. Veronica, the mistress, was only a symptom. The real disease was Marcus himself. "I won't let him touch you again," Eleanor whispered fiercely, stroking her daughter's hair. The words were both a promise and a vow. Her training surged to the surface. She carried Amelia into the guest room, settled her under blankets, and kissed her forehead. Then Eleanor straightened, her entire demeanor shifting from nurturing mother to seasoned officer. She opened her wardrobe, pulled out her pressed uniform, and slipped into it with mechanical precision. Every button fastened was a declaration of war. She holstered her weapon, checked the magazine, and with hands that did not tremble, chambered a round. The sound of steel sliding into place echoed like thunder in the quiet house. Finally, she reached for her phone and dialed attorney David Ellison. His groggy voice answered on the second ring. "David?" Eleanor said, her tone sharp and cold. "I need you, now." Marcus crossed the line, and this time, there will be consequences. And with that, the night shifted. No longer a time for rest, but the beginning of a carefully calculated retribution. The drive to St. Mary's emergency room felt endless, though Eleanor sped through deserted streets with the siren off. Amelia sat slumped in the passenger seat, her head resting against the cold glass, each bump in the road ringing a small whimper from her lips. Eleanor's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned bone white. She had seen broken bodies before, but never her daughter's. Inside the ER, fluorescent lights flickered against sterile walls. Dr. Figueroa, a seasoned physician and an old acquaintance from Eleanor's years on the force, wasted no time. He examined Amelia with a practiced gentleness, then ordered an immediate CT scan. The results came back grim: fractured ribs, internal bruising, and a concussion. Eleanor stood at the foot of the bed, fists clenched, every clinical word the doctor uttered fueling the storm inside her. She nodded curtly, thanked him, and asked for the full report. Paperwork mattered, because justice demanded proof. While Amelia rested, Eleanor slipped into the hallway with her daughter's phone in hand. She'd retrieved it earlier when Amelia had nearly dropped it from her trembling grip. Eleanor's instincts told her that Marcus's cruelty would be spelled out somewhere in digital ink. And she was right. A string of messages glared back at her from Marcus. "You open your mouth, and you'll regret it. Stay quiet if you don't want to lose everything. Remember? No one will believe you over me." Eleanor's jaw tightened. But before she could take screenshots, Amelia suddenly woke and stumbled toward her. "Mom, no!" she cried, snatching the phone from Eleanor's hands, tears streaming down her bruised face. "Please don't. He'll find out." "He always finds out." For a moment, Eleanor softened, pulling Amelia close. "Honey, this isn't just about him anymore. It's about making sure he can't do this again." But Amelia shook her head violently, curling into herself, terror etched into every movement. Eleanor didn't press further, for now. Instead, she shifted her focus. Evidence had many forms, and Marcus had left his fingerprints all over this nightmare. The next stop was the quiet neighborhood 2 doors down. Mrs. Clara, their elderly neighbor, had a security camera perched above her porch. Eleanor rang the bell, her uniform lending her both authority and urgency. Within minutes, Mrs. Clara handed her a USB stick. On it, clear as daylight, was Amelia pounding desperately on Clara's front door at midnight, her swollen face illuminated by the porch light, her voice faint but panicked. Back at home, Eleanor pulled out her department-issued camera. She documented everything, the discoloration blooming across Amelia's ribs, the raw split of her lip, the trembling hand still clutching her sweater. Each photo was framed with precision, angles, timestamps, shadows, all cataloged as if she were processing a homicide scene. Because in her mind, that's exactly what this was, an attempted killing of Amelia's spirit, if not her body. As Eleanor reviewed the images, her resolve hardened. Evidence was no longer just paperwork, it was ammunition, and she was loading every round she could find. Eleanor knew bruises would fade, but fraud left scars on generations. And Marcus was not just a violent husband, he was a predator who thrived on deception. For 3 nights straight, she tracked his movements like she would any suspect on the job. Hidden in her unmarked sedan, camera in hand, she followed him after his pawn shop closed. Sure enough, Marcus's greed and lust led him by the nose. Eleanor caught him outside the Iron Lantern, a dingy bar on the edge of town, his arm snaked around Veronica's waist. They laughed too loudly, careless in their arrogance. Hours later, Eleanor clicked her shutter again as they entered a roadside motel, hands intertwined, oblivious to the world. Each flash of her lens was a nail in his coffin, but betrayal in marriage was one thing. What came next was an ambush Eleanor hadn't anticipated. Late the following afternoon, her phone rang. The name on the screen sent a chill through her. Richard Alcazar, head of the Public Property Registry. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Lieutenant Stone," he began, lowering his tone as if the walls might hear. "I'm calling as a courtesy. Marcus Stone filed land transfer documents last week. The deeds carry both your signature and Amelia's, but I've reviewed them closely. They're forgeries. Bad ones, but legal enough to slip past if unchecked. He's trying to seize your family's inheritance." Eleanor's chest tightened. That land wasn't just acreage, it was her father's legacy, the soil where Amelia had taken her first steps. Her pulse hammered in her ears as Alcazar added, "You need to act fast. If this gets processed through state channels, undoing it will take years." The domestic abuse case had just metastasized into something larger, uglier, a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. Marcus wasn't just breaking bones, he was dismantling lives, brick by brick. That night, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table. Evidence spread like a battlefield before her. Photographs of Amelia's bruises, the threatening texts, the security footage, the motel rendezvous shots, and now, copies of the forged deeds Alcazar had quietly slipped her. It was a mosaic of betrayal, and Eleanor would be the one to piece it together in court. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with Commander Grant, her longtime superior and mentor. In his office, dimly lit with the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, Eleanor laid it all out. "Commander," she said firmly, sliding the evidence across his desk, "this isn't just about Marcus beating his wife anymore. He's committing high-level fraud. He's laundering property, forging signatures, including mine. This man thinks he's untouchable." Commander Grant leaned back in his chair, his weathered hands steepled, eyes narrowing as he flipped through the evidence. Each photograph deepened the furrow in his brow. "Ellie," he sighed, using her nickname, a rare softness in his gravelly voice. "You realize what you're walking into? This isn't just a family matter. Marcus is playing with powerful strings. People who profit from his schemes won't want this dragged into the light." Eleanor straightened, her uniform crisp, her jaw set. "With respect, Commander, I don't care. He hurt my daughter. He tried to steal my family's legacy. And if we let men like him keep hiding behind charm and connections, then justice means nothing." For a long moment, silence filled the room, the weight of her words pressing against the walls. Then Grant gave a slow nod. "All right, Lieutenant. You've got my attention. But be careful. Men like Marcus, once cornered, they fight dirty." Eleanor gathered her files, her resolve like steel. She had exposed Marcus's infidelity, uncovered his fraud, and brought the truth to her commander. The battle ahead would be brutal, but she was no longer just a mother defending her child. She was a cop on the hunt, and Marcus had just made himself the prime target. The pawnshop smelled of dust, metal, and stale cigar smoke. Neon from the street flickered through the barred windows, casting jagged shadows across shelves of stolen goods and forgotten heirlooms. Eleanor stepped through the door, her badge clipped to her belt, her sidearm heavy at her hip. Marcus leaned against the counter, smug as ever, polishing a gold chain that likely wasn't his to sell. "Ellie," he drawled, eyes narrowing with mock familiarity. "What brings the great Lieutenant Stone to my humble little shop?" Her voice cut through the room like steel. "Cut the act. If you so much as raise your hand to Amelia again, I'll make sure you regret it." Marcus chuckled, tossing the chain aside. His arrogance reeked stronger than the cigar smoke. "Regret? She deserved it, Eleanor. A wife who questions her husband deserves correction. You know that deep down, discipline keeps order." Eleanor's hands clenched, but her training kept her steady. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "No, Marcus. Abuse keeps fear. And fear ends tonight." For a brief moment, the mask slipped from his face, just long enough to reveal the cold cruelty beneath. But then his smirk returned and he waved her off. "Go home, Lieutenant. You can't protect her forever." Eleanor turned without another word, but in her mind, his arrogance was already signed and sealed as evidence. She didn't need his confession. She needed his accomplice. Hours later, the city had quieted into a hush of neon reflections and muffled jazz. Eleanor entered a half-empty bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where secrets bled into whiskey glasses and no one asked questions. Veronica sat alone in a corner booth, draped in a crimson dress, her eyes sharp with suspicion and defiance. "So," Veronica purred as Eleanor slid into the seat across from her, "the mighty cop wants a chat. Should I be flattered or worried?" Eleanor placed a thin envelope on the table and slid it forward. "Neither. Just informed." Veronica raised an eyebrow and opened the file with a theatrical sigh. Her smirk grew as she flipped through photographs of herself and Marcus outside the motel. "You think catching me with him scares me? Please. Marcus owns half this town." But when Eleanor produced the second set of documents, the change was instant. Bank ledgers, property deeds, proof of the forged signatures, Marcus's mountain of debt. Veronica's smirk faltered, then cracked. Her fingers trembled as she read the numbers, the fraud, the lies, realizing she was entangled in something far more dangerous than an affair. Eleanor leaned in, voice low but unwavering. "He's using you, Veronica, to cover his debts, to push his schemes, and when he's done, you'll be the one left holding the bag. Maybe even in prison." For the first time, Veronica's bravado broke. Her face paled, and her glass of bourbon remained untouched. He told me it was just paperwork, that the land was already his." "It isn't," Eleanor said firmly. "And when this goes to court, you can either stand with him or stand with the truth. One choice ruins you, the other redeems you." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the jukebox in the corner. Finally, Veronica exhaled, long and shaky. "I'll talk. I'll tell them everything. Just make sure he pays for what he's done." Eleanor nodded, sliding the envelope back toward her. The deal was sealed, not with signatures, but with fear and survival. She had turned the mistress into a witness. And now Marcus's empire of lies had sprung its first fatal leak. Marcus wasted no time striking back. Within days, he filed a countersuit against Amelia and Eleanor, twisting the narrative and accusing them of orchestrating an elaborate fraud to ruin his reputation. His legal team painted a picture of Marcus as the true victim, an honorable man ensnared by two bitter women. The case drew immense public attention. Reporters crowded the steps of the courthouse each morning, their cameras flashing as Marcus strode in with a smug confidence, flanked by his attorneys. To many, he still appeared untouchable. But Judge Cervantes, stern and uncompromising, was determined to strip away theatrics and uncover the truth. Attorney David Ellison, representing Amelia and Eleanor, methodically dismantled Marcus's facade. He presented a series of threatening messages Marcus had sent, messages dripping with intimidation, arrogance, and cruelty. Projected on the courtroom screen, they revealed not just hostility, but a man reveling in his power over others. The room fell into a tense silence as each word burned into the jury's mind. Marcus's jaw tightened, his charm faltering under the weight of his own words. Then came Eleanor's moment. Slowly, she rose from her seat and walked to the witness stand. At first, her voice was measured, almost fragile, as she recalled the years of watching Marcus manipulate, humiliate, and ultimately shatter her daughter's life. But as she spoke, her voice grew steadier, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "Marcus Bennett," she declared, turning toward him, "is not a victim. He is a predator. He preyed on my daughter's trust, on her kindness, and when he had destroyed her, he laughed. He mocked not only her pain, but the very justice system we are standing in today." The courtroom shifted. Jurors leaned forward, captivated. Some audience members wiped tears from their eyes. Even Judge Cervantes allowed a brief pause, granting Eleanor the space to speak from the depths of her grief. For the first time, the tide of public opinion wavered. Newspapers that once printed glowing profiles of Marcus now ran headlines questioning his character. Social media erupted with debate, clips of Eleanor's testimony spreading like wildfire. Hashtags once filled with praise for Marcus turned into threads of doubt and anger. Marcus sat stone-faced, though his eyes betrayed flashes of fury. He clenched his fists beneath the table, unwilling to show weakness. But it was clear. His untouchable image had cracked. The battle was far from over. But for Amelia and Eleanor, this day was a turning point. For once, the truth had pierced the lies. And as the gavel struck, ending the session, the entire courthouse seemed to understand. Marcus Bennett's reign of manipulation was beginning to unravel. The courtroom was silent as Judge Cervantes shuffled the documents before him. Every breath seemed to hang in the air. Then, with a voice steady and unwavering, he delivered the verdict. "Marcus Bennett," the judge began, his eyes cold as steel, "this court finds your conduct reprehensible. Effective immediately, a restraining order is issued against you. All assets under your name are frozen. The fraudulent land transfer is annulled. Furthermore, this matter is hereby referred to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution on charges of domestic violence and fraud." The words struck like thunder. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Cameras clicked furiously as reporters captured the moment the once untouchable Marcus Bennett's empire crumbled. At the defense table, Marcus stiffened, his smug veneer gone. Within minutes, officers stepped forward, cuffing him and leading him away. Two of his closest accomplices, long shielded by his influence, were also escorted out in chains. The audience murmured, some in disbelief, others in relief that justice had finally caught up with him. For Amelia, the verdict was more than legal vindication. It was liberation. Her trembling hands clutched her mother's as the reality sank in. No more nights filled with fear. No more second-guessing whether the truth would ever be believed. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of release. Eleanor wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her close as though she could shield her from every past wound. In that embrace was not just love, but a silent vow. We survived. And we will heal. The days that followed were not easy, but they were different. Amelia moved back into her mother's home, where familiar warmth replaced the shadows of trauma. The house that once felt too quiet was now filled with shared meals, long talks, and gentle laughter slowly returning. Therapy sessions gave Amelia a space to unravel her pain, while Eleanor found solace in support groups for mothers who had walked through similar darkness. Together, they stitched their broken pieces into something whole again. News outlets framed the case as a triumph of resilience. Commentators spoke of the courage it took for two women, armed with nothing but truth, to stand against power and deceit, and prevail. Strangers sent letters of encouragement. Neighbors who had once whispered in doubt now stopped by with flowers, apologies, and gratitude. For Eleanor and Amelia, however, true healing did not come from headlines or public validation. It came from small, everyday victories. Amelia sleeping through the night without nightmares. Eleanor hearing her daughter hum softly while cooking. Both of them daring to imagine a future unshackled by fear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor looked at Amelia and whispered, "We made it, my darling. Justice is ours. And now, peace will be too." Amelia smiled, her eyes reflecting both weariness and hope. For the first time in years, her heart believed it. The story did not end in perfect happiness, but in something far more powerful, renewal. A reminder that courage, though costly, has the power to break chains. And that in the face of cruelty, love and truth could still triumph.